One looks for a screen, goes underneath. Odoricio kicks out from Malik. Wants a three as Vizal gets it. 45-44 Jeanette.
Everything you would expect between these two teams.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Jack Ridenauer and Sean Meyers.
And we welcome you into the first edition of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast for the 2023-2024 season. Sean Meyers, Dan Flickinger filling in for Jack Ridenauer. We're going to have Jack many weeks. We're going to have Dan some other weeks when Jack is unavailable. And Flick, we had this show start a year ago. Glad to bring it back for the first time this year. And I figured it was a good week because we have these section games in the rearview mirror, as at least many of the sections got underway this past week, both on the boys and girls side. We got a lot to get to. We're going to get our starting five, the biggest takeaways. We're going to have plays of the week. We're going to have our team of the week, which is the Kiski Area boys team, and a look ahead as well. But just very quickly, because this is a fast-paced show, very excited to start the show back, and also very excited that we got to see some section games, ones that really matter this past week, and some pretty good ones.
Yeah, it's always fun when you jump into the start of section play because these games are the ones that really count. And by the way, I'm filling in for Jack Ridenauer, and people usually say that, you know, big shoes to fill, right? When you fill in for somebody, for him, it's like big coffee mugs to fill. Yes. With his, affection for Starbucks. So yeah. I don't have a coffee mug in front of me, so I'm already 0 for 1.
Yeah, the caffeine plays well on this show because, again, we go rapid fire. For those who have watched Westmoreland on the Gridiron, similar concept, except we go a lot quicker, much more quick hitting, and we try to discuss a lot of different things because we have both the boys and girls teams that we talk about all throughout Westmoreland County. So let's waste no more time and get to the starting five, the biggest takeaways from not only this past week, but really, I think, to this point of the season, because we're now a few weeks into the campaign. And when you get this far into the season and you're undefeated, that's a significant accomplishment. There's about a half dozen teams across Westmoreland County. 2 of those teams happen to share the same hallways, and that's the Burrell boys and the Burrell girls. And it's an incredible accomplishment for the Buccaneers on both sides. I will say, I think the boys team are very legitimately a title contender. The girls team, they've done what they've needed to. Strength of schedule hasn't been all that challenging so far, though they're coming off of a nice victory against York. But I think both these teams have it rolling, and especially on the boys' side, you look at their victories, they jump off the page.
Oh, my gosh, do they ever? And you look back at the previous game, you talked about jumping into section play, 46-41 win over Shadyside Academy on Friday. A guy by the name of Mackie Bennis, you hear his name, I feel like he's been playing at Burrell forever. He had 16 points. Tucker Batar had 18 points in that game. They played really good defense against a good Shadyside Academy offensive team. They shut down their top scorer. So they were absolutely tremendous in that game. And Sean, that's so important to get that win before the Christmas break, jumping into section play, 46-41. But you mentioned also a nice win over Jeanette. They beat Olsh earlier this year as well. So Burrell boys are really jumping into it. And you mentioned the girls. Yeah, kind of a schedule, maybe the strength of schedule isn't very high, but you can only beat the teams in front of you. And hey, you build up that confidence. They start out the season 4-0, and they're riding high right now with the game against Obama this week.
Yeah, and the victories earlier this season, they just really put the clamps down. Valley has struggled, but they limited the Vikings to 4 points, held Southmoreland to 14. They held Ambridge to 19. So even though you're going against teams that maybe aren't that great, when you can put that type of defensive numbers up, that's very impressive. And then they did the same against a solid York team. They held the Cougars to just 17 and a 20-point win. So they've got it rolling. On the other side, Coach Fantuzzo's done a great job building this Burrell program. I talked to one of his old pals, Brandon Cochran, a Burrell legend, and he said this might be the best Burrell boys team in over a decade. They went to a WPIAL championship with Cole Bush in 2013, and this seems like the best team that they've had since then. Who knows where their season will end up, but right now, they look to be one of the very best in their entire classification.
And Sean, I do want to mention, the Burrell girls will be playing Obama this week. They're also playing Mount Pleasant. That should be a big matchup with Mount Pleasant also off to a good start.
Yeah, the Vikings have been a team that is certainly impressed in the early stages of this season. Well, speaking about being impressive, how about Nate Papuga of Dairy Area? He has been off to a scorching start averaging about 30 points per game. Now, he was really good last year, but he was kind of a 1A, 1B with Gabe Carbonera. He is the man now, and man, they have needed him because they have won some very tight games against some good competition, and he's certainly the biggest reason.
Sean, he has a billboard in Derry right now. I don't know if you knew that. I'm not joking. There's a billboard with Tibbs holding up 2 basketballs in Derry right now. The kid is on cloud 9, and he's very well deserved. I was talking with Tom Esposito about him, and he called him a dog. He said he's extremely coachable. He's a guy that can score at all 3 levels on the court, and he's really worked to do that. He's been able to add polish to his game. Players are feeding off of him. Again, an easy guy to coach, and man, 30 points a game, that is absolutely ridiculous. But that is nice where now, a lot of focus is going to be put on him, obviously, and that allows openings for other guys to develop their game. So look for the Derry Trojans right now. They have a big game this week against Deer Lakes, and Nate Papuga, man, certainly self-made.
Yeah, and I mentioned that they've needed him to produce to that level because some of the games that they had, edged to Laurel Highlands, that was a massive victory to start their season, a 1-point victory. They had about a 10-point win against Connellsville, a 5-point win against Greensburg-Salem in a Westmoreland County matchup. Last time out, they beat Freeport by 9 points. So they've been in some tight games. They found a way to win 5 out of 6 of them. And of course, these are not, kind of hollow points that he is putting up in garbage time. He's doing it when it matters the most. So Nate Papuga, a big reason why the Derry boys are off to a good start. It's been his offense, but when you look at Greensburg-Salem girls, it's been their dominant play on the defensive end. And we're going to get to our team of the week momentarily, but certainly Greensburg-Salem girls were one of the teams that I thought about in contention, and I think they'll probably get it at some point this season. Coach Klimchuk doing what he always does, and that's getting the most out of his group. We know Kate Menkins because she's been doing it for a while, but it seems like a well-oiled team, not just a one-player show right now. Their only loss came against a heavyweight in Blackhawk. Other than that, they have put the clamps down on everybody.
When you have a great coach in Rick Klimchuk, that helps you play good defense, but obviously you need your players to buy in, and I think they've done that. You have to have that effort on the defensive side of the floor, and I think that obviously they've shown that they've done that. 12 points against Ringgold. They played, as you mentioned, a really good Blackhawk team, took them to overtime and lost by 5. They only allowed 18 against the Connellsville Falcons, South Allegheny 11, and then they beat Derry 64-29 last week. So again, you got to have that buy-in on the defensive side of the ball, but that's what plays in big games. That's what plays in the playoffs. You can always play good defense, always have good rebounding, and have that effort there, even when your offense might not be there. But they also have some pretty good offense too. So I think they're going to be a really, really good team this season. Rick Klimchuk, hey, he's been doing it for a long time on the boys and the girls side. Previously at Franklin Regional, he also coached the Jeanette boys a long time ago.
By the way, do you know he's assisting his son right now at Pitt Greensburg with the men's team?
Chris,
so he's double duty.
Jeez, oh man, basketball lifer for sure. And so it's really encouraging to see what Greensburg-Salem's doing this year, and I think they can continue it.
Well, a guy who has continued playing at a high level throughout his entire career is Greensburg Central Catholic senior Tyree Turner. And when we did our Westmoreland on the Gridiron, we talked about him just about every week. Now we're going to talk about him here on the Hardwood as well. He has achieved a milestone. He got to 1,000 points. I was on hand for the call on Friday. It came in a pretty lopsided victory against Riverview. And so we'll talk a little bit about the Centurion as a whole, but obviously the focus on him. That's a major accomplishment. But I think one that we saw coming, going back to what he did as a freshman and a sophomore, he has been a 4-year contributor. Certainly not just scoring, but everything that he does, a true leader for a team.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great way of putting a true leader. We heard him say, after the game that, it was in the back of his mind coming into that game, but he just wanted to win. And he knew what Riverview did to GCC last year. They came up and upset them. And I understand that Riverview doesn't have the same guys they did last year. They brought back some different faces. They lost a good bit of seniors from last season. But that was his main focus. It was on Riverview, not wanting to be upset and getting that big section victory. Then he towed the line and hit that free throw. And Greg Bizignani, Coach Biz, who obviously coached at GCC for a long time, was doing the game with you. And I thought it was interesting. He said after the game, when you guys interviewed Tyree, that he has coached like 6 1,000-point scorers and has never heard an ovation like that for any of those guys like Tyree got on Friday night. So that was really neat to hear. Great young man, very well-rounded. And we saw his athleticism in football and basketball, and who knows what he's going to end up with this year once his career's over.
Yeah, he and Franco Alvarez are a terrific combination, kind of the inside-outside. Turner, I think, has become a much better three-point shooter. Remember, that was the major issue that the Centurions had last year early in the season, is they just couldn't really get it done from the outside. But he was hot early in the game from distance. And again, he's a quarterback in football, and you can tell with the way that he plays basketball that he's kind of a quarterback for that team as well, directing traffic, and a guy, again, that really kind of orchestrates everything that they're able to do under Coach Hyland. Well, for Jeannette girls basketball, it has been an interesting start to this season. They've made some headlines. You might have read some articles. They are doing something that is very unusual. They are playing with 5 players on their roster, at least currently. They're hoping to get maybe another girl or 2 out. But so far, they've made it work. They've won a game already. And, unfortunately, Flick, we talk about this in a positive way because they've been able to overcome this. But it's a reality that this is not the only team that's struggling with the numbers crunch. They are probably the only one in our area that's playing with just 5 players on the roster. And again, if something happens with illness or injury, they're probably going to have to postpone or forfeit some games. But the fact that they've been able to do it, and their coach, Anna Leonard, said it's the right 5 girls, that speaks to the character of them, knowing, hey, we're probably going to get beat up in certain games. We're going to be exhausted after every game, but they still want to go out and compete if at all possible.
Yeah, and I think she has a lot of pride, and those kids have a lot of pride playing as I don't know if she was calling them the Fantastic Five, and you mentioned maybe they added another player to go, I think she said Sensational Six or something like that. But yeah, I mean, there's so many challenges with that, right, Sean? I mean, if a player gets hurt, multiple players get hurt, which always happens during the season, foul trouble, that's a great point. And, in practice, how difficult it is to be able to practice with only 5 or 6 players. Really challenging. We see that with smaller schools sometimes, obviously. I know Coach Leonard, she's been around the basketball circles for a long time. She's trying to get more girls out and hopefully able to do that maybe this year and then, future years. Jeannette girls program had I don't know how long ago it was, maybe 10 years ago or whatever, where they were winning some section titles with Sierra Gregory and Cook and those girls. And they've hit some tough times in terms of getting girls out. Hopefully that they can continue to work on that. But I know those kids have a lot of pride in what they're doing.
Yeah, remember they had that long losing streak. They snapped that last year. Unbelievably, they made the playoffs despite just winning 2 games because of how the section set up. But it looked as though when we saw them on the court this year, they actually had made some strides. They had a nice win against Springdale. Unfortunately, again, you have 5 players. You need everything to go right. So fingers crossed they're able to kind of right the ship and get things going in the right direction. But a story in itself that Jeannette has been able to kind of suit up with just 5 girls at times this season. That'll do it for the starting 5. Now we'll quickly transition into our plays of the week. Yeah, catch your breath.
I'm good.
We've got a couple plays this week, and as we get deeper into the season, we're going to have more and more broadcasts. We're going to have more and more options for plays of the week. But a couple of good ones that took place on Friday night. And I want to start with Jeannette because, Flick, you were there. What a come-from-behind performance by the Jayhawks, and in particular, Kamani Brown, as he was the hero in Jeannette's home win against Sarah Catholic, as he went off in the fourth quarter, including the go-ahead 3-pointer with less than 5 minutes left in regulation, as called by Dave Franzak and Roger Down.
48-47. Brown wants the 3 in the face. Good. 23 points for Brown.
What a performance by Kamani Brown, and of course, much needed for Jeannette. That's a big win because Sarah Catholic, that's a program each and every year that you know is going to be one of the top contenders. And Brown's still an underclassman, but I'm sure you left that gym very impressed by him.
Oh, absolutely. And really, he didn't get off to a great start. I think he missed his first 3 shots of the game or something like that. But man, did he catch fire exactly when Jeannette needed him to. And they always play tough games. Sarah Catholic, those games are always really tough, whether they're at Jeannette or at Sarah. Those 2 teams, it'll be interesting to see what happens when they meet up again.
Well, from Jeannette to their rival Greensburg Central Catholic, we conclude plays of the week with the Centurions and with Tyree Turner because he reached 1,000 points in a lopsided win against Riverview on Friday. And his accomplishment came at the foul line, which caused the home gym to absolutely erupt, with myself and the former coach, Greg Bizignani, painting the picture.
close to breaking this record.
Well, he's heading to the line because even though it was on the floor, it is a penalty scenario. He knocks down this first, and he'll have 1,000.
I think the students know it. They got their hands up with 1 point. So Tyree's usually a pretty good foul shooter. He was 10 for 10 from foul line in the fourth quarter against their game against Berlin Brothers on Wednesday.
He's got 2 cracks at it. First one is good. There's 1,000 points. And if you don't trust my math, just listen to the student reaction.
Well, it's a credit to the whole program to get 1,000 points, but I think it's a real credit to Tyree Turner, how the students, really look to him, show out to him. He's just a friendly kid, well-liked among the whole school. He's a quarterback on the football team, so congratulations to Tyree, the coaches, and his family.
What a accomplishment once again, and you and I know both, Flick, that is one of the loudest gyms that we ever broadcast in, and I think they took it up a couple more decibel levels on Friday when he reached 1,000 points. So a really, really cool sight. He got a basketball immediately, had his family there. They stopped the game briefly. It never gets old to see something like that, especially for a player that we have covered in both sports going back to his freshman year. So really,
a really humble young man, Sean. No doubt.
Absolutely. That'll do it for Plays of the Week. We'll now move on to our Team of the Week, and I mentioned it before. It is the Kiski Area Cavaliers boys team. And again, a lot of great candidates on both the boys and girls side for this first honor, but we're going with the Cavaliers. Now, I will note, I factored in not just what they did this past week, but the season to this point, since this is our first show. They are 5-1, and their victories are very impressive, most notably against WPIAL opponents. They knocked off Deer Lakes. Keep in mind the Lancers played in the state championship game last year. They won 69-41 against the Lancers in the Armstrong tip-off tournament. They beat another perennial powerhouse in Newcastle, a 6A power in Newcastle, 56-45. Their only loss came against Butler and the Golden Tornado, preseason number 1 in 6A, but they rebounded, knocking off Hempfield area by 6 points at Hempfield. And then last time out, 52-50 at Meyers. That's another team each and every year that is not just a playoff participant, but a title contender under Coach Carmody. Corey Smith has this team playing some great ball, and they're doing so despite the fact that they really just returned one starter from last year in Isaiah Gonzalez.
Those wins that you mentioned, I mean, super, super impressive, and you mentioned why. Especially, you look at that Meyers win. I mean, Meyers is so loaded every single year. And then even the loss to a great Butler team, as you mentioned, preseason number 1 in Class 6A. They're being competitive, they're winning, and it really is impressive. Obviously, Corey Smith is a great head coach, and a guy that we used to work with over at Franklin Regional, Steve Scorpion, helping him out this year. We saw him lead Franklin Regional to a WPIAL championship appearance a few years ago. But you mentioned Isaiah Gonzalez, certainly doing his thing. We saw him do it on the football field, now on the basketball court. But a lot of athleticism on this Kiski area team, which makes them very exciting to watch. Many football players playing hoops. You mentioned Terry Martin, our guy there. Carson Heinley, the starting quarterback for Kiski. So it's really going to be interesting to see how if they can continue this great run that they're on, and why not? I mean, I think they have proved that they can. I mean, they played 5 games already. So. And I think that makes this section really interesting, Sean, too. It should be fun, right?
It was a great section last year. So competitive.
Yeah. Franklin Regional's off to a great start. You have Penn Trafford in this section, McKeesport, Gateway. I think it's going to be really remarkable to watch all season long. This might be my favorite section, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of games in this section on WSN. Circle the date on your calendar. Kiski and Franklin Regional will play on January 5th. I didn't even mention Latrobe. They're always in the mix, certainly, too. Latrobe and Kiski will play on January 2nd. So right after the new year, baby, those teams are going to be getting after it in section play.
Corey Smith, third-year head coach. He's done such a great job. He's done a great job prior to that at Leechburg, a guy that I really like. And again, they didn't return a lot in terms of experience. Gonzalez was the guy that they were going to lean upon. Noah Timmons, another senior who played quite a bit last year, although many times as a reserve. But they've got some other players who stepped up, some seniors like Bart Martin. Owen Pearson had been another contributor. But Gonzalez's younger brother, Amari Gonzalez, has become a big factor for them. Colin Keller, we mentioned Heinley. They're doing all this, however, without one of the other guys that they were expecting to be counting on, and Jason Flem. And I believe it was Bill Beckner who wrote a good story about him. The fact that he's out with an ACL injury, and yet he is still valuable to this team, knowing he's not going to be able to play his senior year, but doing whatever he can to help this team out. And you love stories like that, even though you feel for him. But so far, this, I think, really is a team that can compete in 5A, not just in the section, but in the entire classification. Look no further than some of the wins that they have to prove that they can play with anybody.
Yeah, and the bottom line is you want to go on a playoff run. You don't want to just show that you can compete. You want to win games. And I think Kiski Area is in a great position to do that right now.
Yeah, they got a couple games upcoming this week, Indiana and then at Woodland Hills on Tuesday and Thursday, respectively. Once again, the Cavaliers boys are team of the week. Well, I talked about what's upcoming for Kiski Area this week. Let's wrap the show up with a look ahead at some games on the docket this week. Now, there's a handful of section games mixed in this week, but then once you get to Wednesday and Thursday, you're going to get those non-section. And then, of course, we'll start the holiday tournaments the following week. Let's look at some of the bigger boys games. We'll start on Tuesday. You talked about this one earlier when we talked about Papuga. Deer Lakes at Dairy Area on WSN. That's going to be a really big test for the Trojans and for Esposito going against a team that reached the state championship last year. That same night, Greensburg Central Catholic making the trip to White Oak to play Sarah Catholic, as the Eagles are going to look to bounce back from their loss against Jeanette. And then non-section, but I think a really fun matchup, Bell Vernon and McKeesport. Those should all be very intriguing games on Tuesday. We've got a couple of Westmoreland County showdowns on Wednesday and Thursday. Greensburg Salem at Valley, and then Ligonier Valley at Mount Pleasant. Let's look at the girls as well. Monday, we have Greater Latrobe at McKeesport. The Wildcats, pretty good start to the season, but we know how good McKeesport is. I think they might be the front runner right now in 5A. Dairy Area at Valley as well on Monday. Wednesday, Mount Pleasant at Burrell. We talked about the Buccaneers and their great start as they try to stay perfect, but the Vikings have been off to a good start as well. A lot of those great soccer players have been big contributors for the Vikings. Thursday, McKeesport at Norwin. We'll have that coverage on WSN. I am so looking forward to that game. Norwin and Coach Brzeski every year certainly challenge themselves in the non-section. Kiski Area at Penn Trafford, Ligonier Valley at Dairy Area. Collegiately, Monday, we will start our Seton Hill basketball coverage.
Go Griffs.
Yeah, Lock Haven will come to town for the double dip, the men and the women. And then Tuesday, Mansfield against Seton Hill. So two matchups in 2 days for the Griffins, men's and women. Just a quick thought on the look ahead and what's upcoming this week, Flick.
I think this is a fun week and a good mix of some good non-section games, as you mentioned on the girls' side. That game between Norwin and McKeesport is going to be a lot of fun. Even though it's a non-section game, exhibition as they call it, both teams want to win that in the worst way. And, down the line, it could play a little small factor into playoff seeding. Who knows? So I think that game's going to be a lot of fun. But you mentioned, Sean, those big section games too. Deer Lakes and Dairy on Tuesday on the boys' side, GCC Sarah. And then Mount Pleasant and Burrell is going to be interesting, I think too. Is Burrell for real? Is Mount Pleasant for real? We'll see how that shakes out on Wednesday. So a lot of great basketball action this week, a little mix of non-section, section, and then we'll really jump hot and heavy into section play in a few weeks after the new year when Class 6A finally joins the fray and can start playing some section games.
Yeah, it's a little weird. Some sections don't start until 2024. Other ones will have a few games already under their belt by the time that Christmas arrives. But the next handful of weeks are going to be really fun. We're going to have shows. We're going to try to do it every single week on the weekend. Now, I will note next week, the schedule might change a little bit because of the holidays, but we will get a show at some point. Myself and hopefully Jack Ridenauer will triumphantly return.
Hopefully, for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
for the viewers' sake.
You did good enough, but you're no Jack. We'll say that.
Understood.
Certainly. That's going to do it for this inaugural edition for the 2023-2024 Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast. Keep in mind, each and every week, check out our website, westmorelandsports.com. Live broadcast, articles as well. And, of course, this podcast will be up on our YouTube channel. But for now, we'll put a bow on it. For my colleague, Dan Flickinger, Sean Meyers signing off. We'll catch you next time. It'll be right here on the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network.